Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1604. The topic is training and the title is Short-Term Use of Anabolic Steroids. So if you've been listening to our podcast recently, last 10, 14 days or whatever, I've talked about that we have a member Q&A board. Members keep putting up questions, so I keep answering them. And then again, if you want to get your questions answered, but you're not a gym member of Brutal Iron Gym, you can always just email me at brutalirongym@gmail.com. Okay, so the note card for today's podcast wrote, thoughts on anabolic steroids for short term. So, I have coached athletes to pro cards in both tested and non-tested competitions for like aesthetic competitions. So like IFBB Pro, NGA Pro, WNBF Pro, all that stuff. So I've trained people for pro cards, both taking whatever you want to take, and then you can't take whatever you want to take, both those divisions, and in multiple organizations. And then I have coached people to top 50 rankings, elite totals, and powerlifting for both tested and non-tested as well. So I'm very familiar with steroid use for aesthetics and strength. So I do understand it. Just to give you a little background of what I'm of the opinion that my opinion is very useful, and it's firsthand knowledge. So, okay. Using anabolic steroids to some degree is a trade-off. Even if you get blood work done multiple times a year, which you should if you're going to take steroids, even if you take preventative care supplements, which you should if you're going to take steroids, even if you have a coach that's conservative in drug use, which you absolutely should, there are still risks. Most notably, the physical risks. If you're looking at impact on hormonal health long term, impact on organs, especially if you take orals versus injectables, there's a lot of difference there as well. But there are physical risks, but there's also mental risks. If you can take something to look better, well then, how much even better could you look? Ooh. And, well, if I'm taking this one thing, why don't I add this other thing? Why don't I add this other thing? Why don't I add this other thing? So it can very quickly become a perfectionist type game. What's the most progress I can make? What's the most drugs I can take without killing myself? And that's unfortunately what it really turns into for a lot of people. So it becomes this game of perfection. And that filters into other areas of life. As they pursue that perfection when it comes to their body or performance, man, everything else becomes secondary. Relationships become secondary, work becomes secondary, your happiness becomes secondary because you're never happy until you reach the goal, or until you reach the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. As soon as you reach that thing, you're not happy because you're going for the next thing now. So steroids do carry physical risks and physical consequences, but they carry enormous mental and emotional risks and consequences as well. So there is a cost to steroids other than their price. There's a cost physically, there's a cost emotionally. So if you're considering whether you should use steroids or not, my question is, what are you going to get in return? So you're going to put out the money for steroids, you're going to put your physical health at risk, you're going to put your emotional and mental health at risk. What the hell are you doing that for? What are you going to get for it? That's a ridiculously important question to ask. Very, very, very important question to ask. So I do work with many trainers. Actually, over half of my clients are personal trainers. And I work with many athletes who aren't trainers, but they still like programming. And there is a good portion of the people I work with that make their money. They make their living off of the way they look, off the way they perform. So it's extremely, extremely important for them to look good always and to perform well always. That's a lot of pressure. So what they're getting is money. True. But they are getting self-confidence. They feel more confident in themselves, just personally, the way they look and feel, but also in business. If they look and perform a little better than everybody else, they're a little more confident in their business, right? And in like what their potential is and what they can do, what they can achieve business-wise. Then they're also getting to be their own boss. especially the clients who that's their only job. That's what they do for life. So they get to be their own boss. They're getting more control over their work-life balance. So they're getting a lot when it comes to what like the cost that steroids is costing them. What are they getting in return? They're getting a good bit in return. They're getting money in return, and they're getting a lifestyle that better matches what they want. Now, that sounds great, but there's an enormous and absolutely ridiculous level of pressure on those people. They have to have constant social media content. So I don't even do much on social media, but even the little bit that I do is like time consuming. So when I have clients and they put together like videos and sequence videos, and there's a screen transition like every 3 to 6 seconds, because there's all these research about how long people's attention span is. So even if you're doing a static video where you're just talking into the camera, it's very important, and it's actually appropriate that you have little small cuts in the film. So there's always something moving, something going on other than just what you're saying. So there's all this science to it. So I've read all into it because I think it's super exciting. But one of my clients, I think she spends like 3 hours a day on social media stuff, which is bonkers. Good for her. But that's a lot, a lot of time. And that's pressure she feels, so we talk about that, and she feels there's constant pressure on her for social media content. And then all the people talk about the fear of like relevancy. Are they relevant anymore? Are they in people's minds? Are they falling behind? And there's no long-term financial security in that. There's no like retirement fund for personal trainers. So you're looking at like health insurance, costs and whatnot. I mean, it's just, the list goes on and on. So there's extreme pressure on them all the time, including the pressure to maintain their looks. So the pressure on their diet, pressure on their training, pressure on their self-care that, helps improve the way they look and feel and stuff. That all becomes number one priority, and it leaves very little time for anything else. So if they have a significant other, the significant other has to understand that they're sharing number one space, or they're actually number two. And that's a lot of pressure. So it's not like, okay, I'll take drugs and look amazing, and then I sell a bunch of programming and train people and life will be great. Good Lord. No, absolutely not. So the clients I work with, we do online journals where people can write to me, and it's private, so everybody has their own journal. And they write to me whatever they are thinking, any questions they have. And man, I'll tell you what, like the stress that they have is bonkers, crazy high. So it is not just, take drugs and you live a happy life. It's anything but that. It's the complete opposite of that, basically. So anything you choose to do in life will have pros and cons. Absolutely everything. Every single thing you do has good things and bad things about it. So for them, they're using steroids, various types and various like intensities throughout the year, and they're getting something for it. Well, if you're going to use steroids, if you're considering using steroids, what are you getting from it? Is what you're going to get from it worth the cost? A typical like steroid cycle, and there's a lot of variance to what's typical. Let's say 8 to 12 weeks. If you do an 8 to 12 week cycle of steroids for aesthetics, just to feel more confident, say in the summer, absolutely stupid. Not worth it. Typically, I would not be so blunt. I'd make you kind of think it through more and maybe come to your own conclusion. But no, not. Like you're just 8 to 12 weeks is not enough time. Steroids is a very long-term game. Can you make progress in 8 to 12 weeks that's noticeable in photos? You bet, absolutely. Is that going to stay? 8 to 12 weeks after the cycle, it's really unlikely unless you also invest into post-cycle therapy like PCT. And a lot of people, if they're just doing a singular cycle, depending on who they're getting their drugs from, they often don't do a PCT, so their testosterone and estrogen are jacked up for a while after the cycle. They regain body fat and a ton of water retention, and they actually look just as bad as before, or if not worse than they did before they did the cycle. So it's not really going to be long-term gains. You have to really properly control blood work and properly control your post-cycle therapy if you're going to, come off from the cycle and take time to kind of let your body heal and recover and let joints recover and whatnot, and then push back up. So there's a lot of cost to it when you want to do it correctly. So one cycle of 8 to 12 weeks, if you just take the steroid drug itself, like let's say you take testosterone, You take some variation form of testosterone, and you're like, okay, I'm going to get my testosterone, I don't know, whatever you want to do. I don't want to say numbers, but you're taking X amount of, outside of the body, testosterone. During 8 to 12 weeks, your body's going to realize that the external source is providing testosterone. So it starts to decrease its internal production. And that's where, like, long-term use of steroids, if you don't ever come off and do proper PCT, it can lead to infertility. So and it can lead to you basically having just crappy hormones for the rest of your life, and you're always going to have to be on some type of hormone replacement therapy. So hormone replacement therapy is, essentially, I'm just going to use like some open verbiage here, like kind of loose verbiage, is you're going to be taking steroids like testosterone, but you're taking it to just get you to like an optimal, normal physiological level. When you take steroids that like we're talking about in today's podcast, it's like you're taking it way above normal physiology. So hormone replacement therapy is you're replacing the hormones you should have. When you're taking anabolic steroids and you're just kind of blowing up way above normal levels because you want to get jacked or you want to get super strong, that's consequences. Your body's going to start to adapt to that and make changes to it. Now, you're not going to notice that because you keep taking the exogenous source, but the outside source. So you're not going to notice that. But when you try to come off of it, there's going to be a rebound and there's going to be some issues to that. So I don't think, in my opinion, is that it is absolutely not worth doing a single cycle and thinking that that's going to like make a significant difference in your life or do anything of any significance. So even if you want to take like an 8 to 12 week cycle to do a powerlifting meet, it's not worth it, but I could see if somebody's trying to do it to get a certain title. So for example, in powerlifting, once you reach an elite total, I think it's like 1% of competitive powerlifters ever get an elite total. It's very rare. But if you get an elite total, once you have it for life. So I could see somebody saying, well, I'm so close. I'm 20, 30 pounds away from the elite total. Maybe if I do a steroid cycle, I can get a little bit of boost in strength. All of a sudden, boom, I can hit my elite total. Well, there's a lot of boom potential for blowing up your joints as well. But let's say you get it. Let's say you get the elite total. What do you freaking do? What are you going to do with it? No one remembers what anyone else lifts. I remember what my clients lift because that's my job. But if you're not my client, I have absolutely no clue what you've squat, bench, and deadlift. So I don't know. How the hell would I know? If I saw somebody on social media and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm very happy for them. They had a great meet. Ask me a week later what they did and I'll have absolutely no clue. So if you're trying to do it to get like a big number, like, oh, I want to get a 600-pound deadlift, who gives a shit? That is rough. And maybe I should have edited that a little bit. But like, you get to know that you had a 600-pound deadlift. Congratulations. And, that can definitely be nice for you. That can give you support. So the numbers that I have reached, my PRs, I'm proud of them. But no one else knows them. If I were to even ask my mom, I bet she can't tell me what my numbers are. No offense, Mom, and I don't expect you to. But I don't think that anybody knows what my numbers are. So they're for me. But if you're trying to take steroids to get this big number because you want recognition for this number, like, oh man, I'm going to get this total and then people are going to know I'm super strong. No one's going to remember your total. Absolutely not. So you have to get a title for it. If you're going to get a title, say you're going to get an elite total, great, because you do get to keep that for life. So you earned it. It's done. It's yours. But what are you going to do with that? Are you going to capitalize on that? Are you going to start selling programming, selling training? And then even though the title might bring a person in, you can sell your first program. You can sell your first, batch of training sessions. What's going to keep them? Just because you have an elite total does not mean somebody will stay with you. It might get them hooked on the first one, the first sale, but it's not going to keep them. What are you going to do next? You can't just keep taking more steroids and more steroids and more steroids. Once you hit an elite total, there is international elite from there. There's world records and whatnot. But that's less than 99.9% of the people have that stuff. You're unlikely to be in the 99.9%. I'm not in the 99.9%. So what are you going to do with it? You're going to get this title, and then what? Then what? You're going to go on and get certifications? Are you going to start to learn more things? Or are you going to, are you going to build on it? So my thoughts on short-term cycles for steroids is it's absolutely not worth it. Most steroids take multiple cycles or months, like months on end. Like I'm talking about 6 to 12 months. Now that's different type of like human growth hormone, for example. But like most steroids, most kind of like those type of drugs, they're a long-term game, multiple cycles, many months to get anything of like tangible significance. One cycle is very unlikely to be significant for long term. But it is likely to have long-term consequences. You're going to have some hormonal issues, might have some organ issues, and then you're going to have a hard time when you come off that cycle. Like, is it worth even training anymore now that you're not taking the drugs because the drugs were making your training worth even more? Now that you're just back to normal recovery, is it even useful? Like, I'm not motivated anymore. So you might actually lose motivation after the steroid cycle. There are so many freaking consequences that you will be unaware of. Steroids are a long-term game. They carry a high expense to do it safely. So you must get a return on your investment in a maximal way. If you're not going to make fitness your number one priority, if you're not making your living based on the way you look or the way you perform, then I would 100% advise not to do a cycle of steroids. 100%. If you are going to put fitness as your number one priority, if you do make your living based on the way you look, the way you perform, there is a shit ton of stuff that you can do and be perfect with before you ever have to take drugs. Your nutrition can be almost endlessly like nuanced. Training, absolutely endlessly nuanced. Training is forever, and then the way you sleep, hydration. If you look into like massage work to make sure that your muscle bellies are fully open so they can actually maximize their size and their strength potential. There's like so many other like red light therapies for muscle and joint. There's so many other things you can do. So many other things. And an enormous, I cannot stress it enough, an enormous component of steroids to always remember is that steroids enhance what you do. They do not replace what you do. The biggest thing that steroids do is they help with protein synthesis. Basically, they help you convert protein to muscle tissue faster and to greater amounts. Now, there's an enormous amount of other stuff. You can do like fat loss based like steroids. But essentially, if you want to build muscle, you have to train like an absolute beast. You have to eat appropriately to provide the nutrients at all times for muscular growth. And then steroids just help make that happen faster. If you want to lose body fat, you have to be in a caloric deficit in some way, whether that's eating less or moving more. And you have to do that ridiculously consistent. And you have to balance being too far versus not far enough within that balance at all times. And steroids will just make the fat loss happen a little bit faster. If you want to get stronger, you still have to go and squat, bench, deadlift, and do overhead press, all the strongman stuff, all the powerlifting stuff. You have to do all of that all of the time, continuously, with minimal, if any, mistakes. And then steroids just make the results happen a little faster. Steroids enhance what you do. They absolutely, in no way whatsoever, replace what you do. So it still comes down to you have to do everything. Steroids are not a shortcut. If you think of like a shortcut is, instead of me, climbing up and down a mountain, I'm going to go through a tunnel. Steroids are not a tunnel for nutrition and training. You still have to climb the damn mountain. You just get to climb it a little bit faster. So instead of coming to climb it barefoot, you get to climb it in sneakers. Climbing it in sneakers is sure as hell a lot easier than trying to climb a mountain barefoot, right? You can go faster in sneakers than you can barefoot. That's what steroids do. They help you climb in sneakers, not barefoot. They sure as shit are not a tunnel. They are not a tunnel through the mountain. You still have to climb the damn mountain. You still have to do all the work. So if you're thinking about a cycle of steroids, you have to do everything 100% correct for those to even have any difference. They have to have something there to enhance. Steroids have to have a workload amount to enhance. If there's no workload, there's no enhancement, right? So, went off on a little tangent there. It was way off my notes. But I really would strongly urge someone to not do short-term anabolic use. I really don't think that it's worth the consequences. I don't think you're going to get a reward out of it to counter the risks and the negative. Okay? Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Gave a little perspective for everybody. If anybody has any questions, you can always reach out. My email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. If you're a member of the gym, keep putting up these index cards. Super fun. Really love this. It's exciting when I know somebody's participating. Like, we get a lot of downloads every day, but it's fun to actually have tangible ways to have people participate in the podcast, whether that's an email from somebody, a message on Instagram, comment on YouTube, like whether it's index cards in the gym, just however people reach out. I love it. It's super motivating. I do this thing every single day, so it's very motivating to keep me doing it. I've been doing it for 1,604 days. That's ridiculous. So I do appreciate the motivation to keep this going. Okay, so if you need anything, want anything, just reach out. Email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. If you like our podcast, please share it. The more people we share it with, the more people we can help through the podcast. That's what we want the podcast to be, is a service for everybody. Absolutely free service. Ask anything, get an answer. Then thank you to those who donate to support the podcast. It does have a high yearly cost. So the donations help cover some of that for me. So this service is not free for me. So I do appreciate the donations to help support it. I really love this as a way to give back to the world for the blessings that I've had. So I'm very blessed and very happy to be able to do this. And the donations really help cover some of that burden of cost. So if you want to donate, you can do that on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. Thank you very much. Also, if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. Find us and follow us on Instagram, and find us and follow us on YouTube. Both places we're under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.